Hello, everyone, and welcome to Biohackers Lab. I'm your host, Gary Cohen, and on today's episode, I have Luis Villasenor. Luis is the founder of Ketogains, a community-driven exploration into the pursuit of physical excellence via ketosis. He is also known as Darth Luigi online and is regarded as one of the most experienced and knowledgeable people in the low-carb keto community, and is many people's go-to guy when applying a low-carb diet for bodybuilding. Luis, thanks so much for coming on to the show today.
Thank you, Gary, for the invitation.
So I just blasphemized your surname. For any Spanish listeners, could you just say your surname properly?
Well, as if you were a Spanish speaker, you would say Villasenor. But normally for people who speak English, it's easier just to say Villasenor.
And I can see why you chose Darth. Just before we get into it, why Darth Luigi? Where does that come from? Is it like a Mario Brothers thing?
In a way, it's very much like they used to call me Luigi. My name is Luis, of course, which is like the Italian version of Luis. And I'm a Star Wars fan. So it was very much my alias when I used to play online games or so. So basically, that's it.
Okay.
When I first made an account on Reddit, that's the username I chose. So basically, that's how it stuck.
Mm-hmm. So for anyone for a little bit more background on you, I've been following you a little bit on and off over the years, and I remember you're a prolific, I don't know if you still are, moderator on the keto subreddit, which is a massive resource. Are you still involved in that?
Yes, I am. I'm not as involved in the way as in being there all the time because of my responsibilities on Ketogains. But like every time that people tag me, I always respond. So if you tag me either like in any other forum that I'm present, I'll always take a look and give you advice.
Okay. So my first question for you then is, why did you choose a ketogenic diet approach for strength training all the way back in 2001?
My background is very much that I was a classic overweight kid. So I wanted to grow muscle, but I was also stay lean. I didn't like the idea of a classic bodybuilding where you have to bulk and then cut. In my mind, it really made no sense to get fat and then have to diet down, especially because I had dieted down or lost weight by diet, and I know how hard and tiresome it is. So again, it didn't make much sense. So I was looking for a way to build muscle and stay lean at the same time. And upon doing research, I found out that a keto diet could be very much the answer. Because for some people, they'd say that you cannot build as much muscle while on keto. And it's very much masked by not really gaining that much water weight, glycogen. That's one of the main reasons people think they cannot build that much muscle on keto. But it also allows you to stay leaner, due to, I'd say, in a way that you are not so hungry when you are in ketosis. It allows you to maintain a caloric deficit or to keep track of your calories in a more sensible way or easier way, or even intuitively for some persons.
Mm-hmm. So it's more sustainable, you found?
For not for everybody, but for people like me, it was very much the answer. First and foremost, because I think a lot of people, I tend to binge on carbs. So if I have a high carb meal, especially of processed foods, it's very easy for me to overeat. Whereas if I'm eating whole foods, low carb foods, I can very much get satiated with a little amount. And it's easier for me to push myself to eat more if I need to, as to reach my macros, rather than to stop eating. I don't know if you get the feeling, but again, it's like try to eat just one slice of pizza versus try to eat, suppose that you have to eat two chicken breasts and you only have hunger for 1.5. Well, it's going to be easier for you probably to eat a little bit more than to stop with one slice of pizza.
Mm-hmm. All right. So do you think that's a an issue that traditional bodybuilders have? That I'm just thinking of the diets that I normally would think that they eat, where they're eating chicken salads and protein shakes and bars and everything because they're eating so many meals in a day. But that, in a way, some of those foods, you think they could trigger an overeating effect?
It's not the time, the amount. Well, it's not actually the how many times you eat, but more so I'd say the combination of food. Eating a super what we call highly palatable foods that also are or that spike insulin tends to make people overeat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a doctor on the show, Dr. Tro. I don't know if you've come across him yet, Collegian.
No.
So he was telling me about, because he went from 350 pounds in weight, and I think he's down to 190, and he loves weight training. And he was talking about the same thing, the problem of certain foods that you just can't eat enough of them. It's like a weakness, a food trigger. And he found the low-carb approach was doing the same thing. Yeah, so it's interesting to hear you saying the same, even when it comes to muscle gain. So
Exactly.
So how then? Because I think you touched a little bit on it earlier, where you said that some people would say, "How do you gain muscle on keto?" Because I think maybe a common question would be like, "But don't you need some level of carbs to be able to grow muscle or maintain muscle?" The whole maybe glycogen thing.
That's a little bit a misunderstanding, really, because people think that first, what you actually need to build muscle is protein, not really fat nor glucose. The main I'd call building block of muscles is protein, right? So then, what else do you need? Well, an adequate training regime. That's the bread and butter. Training correctly and efficiently, which a lot of people don't know how to do properly, and then eating an adequate amount of protein consistently. You can store fat in your body, you can store glycogen, but you really cannot store protein. Outside of your muscles, there really no way to store protein. You have a small storage of amino acid pool, but that is depleted on a day-to-day basis. And it's not just for building muscle. It's basically all of your processes in the body use protein and amino acids. Enzymes are made of proteins. Your cells are made of proteins. People tend to think that just that protein is just for muscle. And it's really, I tend to say that human beings are a bag of proteins in a way, right? So every day we are wasting away, and we need to repair ourselves, and that is what a protein is principally used for, not just for muscles, right? Then glycogen is important, of course, but people usually just think that you can only make glycogen from glucose or carbohydrates. Glycogen, as in the muscles, can be refilled by itself in less than 24 hours via the recycling of lactate. Lactic acid is recycled into glucose via the Cori cycle by itself without you eating anything else. Then also you have gluconeogenesis, which a lot of people who do keto are afraid of. And basically it's nothing to be afraid of. It's a normal process. If you didn't had a GNG, basically you would die. And it's a way of your body of generating as little or as much glucose as it needs on a daily basis without you having to ingest carbohydrates. So for people who are doing keto and are doing strength training or any other sports, as long as they don't require that much intensity, there's really no need to ingest dietary carbohydrates. All the glucose that you need, especially if you've been doing keto for quite a while, because you adapt, are going to be generated or recycled by themselves.
Okay.
Of course, there are some types of sports that may need a little bit more glucose, and that is what you have, not necessarily carb loading, but a targeted ketogenic approach where you increase a little bit your carbohydrate intake around your training. And when I say a little bit, I'm talking about 5 up to 50 grams, depending on the duration of the session, of the type of sports, etc. But most people will still be ketogenic, and we would be saying on average between 50 to 80 grams of carbohydrates for these types of people. Whereas normal sedentary people would be using probably 20 to 35 grams of carbohydrates a day.
Okay, so you're more of a fan of, would you say, a very low carbohydrate diet then for general management?
I myself stay on around 20 up to 40 grams of carbohydrates a day, even when strength training. I really don't feel the need. I know, and I train some people that do very glycolytic sports such as CrossFit or Taekwondo that may need to increase their carbohydrate needs when they are training. But again, instead of staying on 25 or 40, they may be on 50 or 80 grams on days they train, and the carbohydrates ingested around the training.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about that, even someone who does like cage fighting or jiu-jitsu or something, that even sprint training, I wonder, so you're saying just on their training days they might ingest more carbs, but 80 grams of carbs in a day is not a lot compared to some athletes.
Yeah, depending again on the type of training you do, you may need a little bit more or less.
Okay,
but that's that's something that you start with the low threshold, and you start adjusting depending on how you feel and what your goals are. But again, it really depends on what you are trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. So when you were talking about the protein part there, you touched on the issue with the gluconeogenesis, and that I think there's still an issue of fear in some people especially in the ketogenic community when it comes to protein intake. How do you address that when it comes to someone who is ketogenic and they want to gain more muscle? How much protein do they figure out that they need to eat in a day? How do you work that out?
It's very easy. The thing is that people use a therapeutic approach to ketosis when their goal is, for example, body recomposition. So when you ask people what a ketogenic diet is, you will find most refer to it as a 70% fat diet approach, 20 to 25% protein, and the rest carbohydrates. And that is fine and all, but that again is the definition of a therapeutic approach to ketosis, which was developed to treat epilepsy. And that's very much different from what most people are doing a ketogenic diet for. A lot of people come to a ketogenic diet for losing body weight. Some come from for improved body composition. Some other comes for the improved health and cognition effects. If you're doing it for, I'd say, an overall approach and want to get the best of the diet, I would suggest to dismiss percentages altogether. And just instead of using a percentage, use grams in accordance to your goals and to your body weight. So how do you set, for example, protein? Well, if you're sedentary, instead of using a percentage, what you do is the first macro you calculate is protein. So you see how many pounds you weigh, you see how much body fat you have, and what you do is you multiply your lean pounds, that is your total weight minus your body fat percentage, by 0.8. And that's the starting point. So that will be your protein intake or requirement for the day. Then carbohydrates, it can be between 20 to 30 or even more, depending again on your activity. And then the rest of your calories come from fat. If you want to lose body fat, then you're gonna have to be in a caloric deficit, even if you're on keto. Some people say that calories don't count on keto. I don't really agree with that. That is why you have so many people that stall on a ketogenic diet after a while, as your body becomes efficient at using ketones and adapting to using fats as energy. It starts to, I'd say, even out. Like that's probably another topic that we can talk later on. But when you start a ketogenic diet, a lot of people lose weight very rapidly. First, because they lose water and glycogen weight, and also because there's some metabolic inefficiency in some persons that they're not really used to getting energy from fat. They're more so adapted to getting the energy from carbohydrates. So what happens is that they waste a lot of energy as heat. So even if they are eating, in theory, more calories than they would need, or eating as much as they want, that calorie or that energy is wasted for a bit of a while. We don't know exactly how long this lasts, but varies from person to person. On the other hand, as you become more adapted, you start to actually use this energy better. And this is why you see sometimes people that stall and don't stop losing weight. Probably they don't gain weight either, but they stay stable. But again, they want to lose body fat, and they don't understand why it's not working anymore. Well, because you are probably not eating at a caloric deficit. And this is something that I've seen on myself, and also I've heard Mark Sisson, Rob Wolf, and many others that have been doing low carb or keto for years tend to report. Your body becomes super efficient at using fatty acid as fuel. And because fatty acid generate more ATP than carbohydrates, it makes sense that your body is actually requires a little bit more calories that you would need on a high carb diet. So it's not that you are down regulating your metabolism. It's more so that you're getting enough calories, or you're getting enough energy or more energy from less energy intake. It's very much like if you had a well-oiled car that is going to give you more mileage by using less gasoline. It may sound a little counterproductive for people who want to eat more, because if you were to eat about the same, you're going to maintain or not going to lose weight. But if you look at it as an evolutionary, in an evolutionary context, it's a benefit. You actually can perform better with less energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was like a parenthesis. For someone who is actually trying to strength train and build muscle, I would suggest to increase a little bit more than the protein. Instead of using 0.8 grams per lean pound, you can go as high as 1 gram per lean pound, and that's more than you're likely ever going to need. People tend to think that more protein is better. And again, talking about efficiency and optimization, more protein really doesn't do anything. It's just going to be used as energy, as extra calories. And in the sense of optimization, it's best to use those calories from something else, like probably get a little bit more fat, or probably get a little bit more vegetables, because there's only so much protein your body can use at any given day for us to build muscle and your other processes. If you ingest more, probably then it's going to be burned as energy. And there's an order and priority of how your body metabolizes each energy substrate. So if you ingest more protein that your body actually can utilize, what it does is it starts to burn that protein as energy, that extra protein as energy, and then it reduces fat oxidation. It's not going to be by that much, but again, talking about having all the pieces work optimally, there's really no sense to increase calories from protein, because it's really not going to do anything.
Okay, because I don't know if you've seen or heard about sort of this new movement I'm seeing become aware of, is the Keto Carnivale kind of movement. So you've got ketogenic people who are trying to eat more of a carnivore diet, so an all meat diet, and I guess trying to mix the two. I guess, would your thoughts there be that they could be ingesting too much protein when it comes to body composition?
It's not that it's going to be bad. It's just not optimal. You have to understand that my approach is, in a way, I'm a marketeer and business administration first and foremost. So I try to use that application into fitness. What is going to give you the best approach, and where can you use optimally all your resources? You can eat more protein, but the thing that happens here is, yes, you're probably going to be more satiated up to a point, but you're just wasting resources in a way that is not going to give you more. There comes a time where the law of diminishing returns applies. You're not going to be building more muscle by ingesting more protein. You can, people who are carnivore ingest protein, but also ingest fat. So there's a time where it would be better to, instead of having more calories from protein, that you would move those calories for fat intake that is going to give you better energy.
Okay.
And also another drawback of just going carnivore, in a way, again, it really depends on how you administer it, is that it's going to be likely a more expensive diet due to the amount of meat that you have to eat. Again, it really depends of where you buy your meat, right?
Mhm. And that's when you're talking about when you're working out things from a calorie point of view, that you're looking at how much meat you would have to buy to get X amount of calories in a day for your needs.
In a way, because if you go back to basic nutrition, 1 gram of protein is 4 calories, and 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. So you're basically getting 2 times the calories from fat versus from protein. And again, extra protein is really not going to do anything to improve body composition up to a point.
Mhm. And do you have a preference when it comes to sources of protein that you found best for building muscle?
Always animal protein.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really a fan of using vegetable sources of protein. First, because they are not optimal when you classify proteins, you do so in the sense of biodisponibility or bioavailability. And vegetable proteins are not available in the same way as animal proteins. There are some cases where you actually need 2 times the same amount of vegetable protein to meet the same requirements and absorption of animal protein. So, for example, to put it in an example, the highest bioavailability of protein would be between whey and egg, which basically, if you have ingest 10 grams of whey, your body absorbs basically the 10 grams of protein, right? If you were to have 10 grams of, for example, don't quote me exactly, but because I'm going by what I remember, but probably pea protein, it could be about 65 or 70% of the absorption. So you're losing a lot of protein there.
Mm-hmm.
You would have to ingest way more. And again, talking about calories, you do get the calories, but you don't get the protein. So it's not optimal. Again, talking about optimization. And then also some amino acids are missing on vegetable protein. So you have to it's not that you cannot build muscle while going vegan. I know and I have friends that are vegan and are very successful at building muscle and power lifters. But for me, it's not the best way.
Mm-hmm. So if you've got anyone who is vegetarian or vegan, can they still join the Ketogains community to learn how
Of
to?
course, they can and they are welcome to. But we really don't offer that much information in that regard because our studies and what we do is based more so on a paleo and ketogenic diet.
Okay, great. So are you a fan then of protein shakes and protein bars and all that kind of stuff then, as when you're trying to build muscle?
No, I'm more so of a fan of whole food. I do think that shakes, when used in an intelligent way, are like a good alternative, especially for people who tend to not be that much hungry. But there's a very big difference between a whey shake, for example, versus a protein bar. First, because whey shakes is just the whey. It's denatured whey or hydrolyzed protein. Really depends on the source. But in the end, it's very much a non-processed food source. Talking about after the industrial process, but it's just the whey. Whereas a protein bar is really just a Snicker bars with added protein. It's not optimal in the sense of everything that it has. I'd rather, instead of, for example, having a protein bar that on average is 200 calories, I'd rather have probably 250 grams of chicken breast or a brisket or any other food that is going to be much more sustainable. Plus, it has another benefit, which is called the thermic effect of food. It's not the same to have one shake or to have one protein bar from processed food versus to have the whole, a food as close as its origin, because of how your body reacts and absorbs it.
Okay. And so when when you're training and you're building muscle, is there an optimal time to have the protein intake then with growth? So I've got friends that I see they take, I think, protein shakes sometimes before they exercise. Is that the best time? Well, should you be eating a piece of chicken breast before you exercise, or should you be doing fasting and exercising in a fasted state?
So like I did fasting like I doing one meal a day almost 2 years ago, and it works, but not as people think. There's really nothing anabolic about fasting. As much as you have read that there's an increase in human growth hormone, etc., etc. If you actually look at the studies, they don't support the growth of muscle. More so, they're retaining, and it's a protective mechanism for your body to really don't go to full catabolic when you are on, where you are probably in a period of where you're not really going to get food. Again, looking at it from an evolutionary perspective, it's not optimal to train fasted. And from studies I've reviewed and researched, it's best to have a protein shake before training, not after. And the reason is digestion. Supposing that you're going to have a whey shake, which again, I said before, is the fastest absorbing type of protein there is, that is absorbed at about 10 grams per hour. So considering the typical duration of a training workout, which would be between 1 to 2 hours, the protein would be hitting your bloodstream just about when you finish your training. So if you actually want the protein to sync up with the muscle protein synthesis process, again, you give your body the signal, which is strength training, then you give your body the material, which is the protein, then it makes sense to have the protein immediately before training. So it's about 30, 20 minutes before you hit the gym versus after. If you want, again, talking about optimization, the second best thing would be to have it like some people do after. But I normally suggest our clients to have it just before.
Okay, that's a great tip there.
Yeah, and also to never train fasted, again, because when you're training fasted, you are breaking down muscle. That's a fact. So you're training to build muscle. You want to optimize and you want to build as much muscle as possible, then have at least a shake.
Okay, yeah. And because another thing I've seen, especially with bodybuilders, and you see them on all the YouTube documentaries where they even inject insulin for muscle growth. And I guess sometimes they eat carby food afterwards for like an insulin spike. Is that, but with the ketogenic diet, it's trying to avoid these sort of insulin spikes.
But you don't, like, here's the deal. People think that of insulin as if it was evil, and they forget that it's actually an hormone made by your body and it has a purpose. What is bad is to have your insulin high all the time. Insulin is not a thing that makes you go fat just because. Insulin, what it does is helps nutrients get stored into your cells. That's why bodybuilders do, the injecting insulin thing. And here's the deal. You know why I also suggest people to have a whey shake before training? Because it spikes a little bit insulin. Then it primes your body for growth. But people think that you need carbs to grow, to do this. No, protein also does this at a slower or more manageable way. So it's best to have just your whey shake, and that's it. Also, another thing, people think that when you do strength training, especially strenuous, your insulin will also sometimes spike up. That's something that people who have diabetes notice notice more often than people who don't. And again, it's because your body uses glycogen. Even if you don't ingest carbohydrates, glycogen is stored in your liver and stored in your muscles. Again, resynthesized even if you don't ingest carbohydrates. And what happens is that probably you depleted a little bit of your muscle glycogen. So your liver squeezes what glycogen it has left on your bloodstream, and then it generates a little bit of an insulin spike. It rises your blood glucose. Exercise by itself can rise blood glucose.
Yeah, because I saw that I had a previous guest on, a type 1 diabetic, Dr. Carrie Diulis, and she loves showing stats on everything. She's quite a metric kind of driven orthopedic surgeon. But she saw that even as a type 1, that, if she did high intensity training, what it would do to her glucose. I saw, and I did come across some researchers who showed the same thing, that there's quite a difference in the diabetic population between high intensity training versus like low intensity training. And that just ties in exactly what you were saying there, where the strength training can actually raise your glucose levels.
Yeah, it can tend to happen.
Yeah. And but that's meant to only be short term. It's not that your glucose levels will stay raised for a long period.
No, they stay like that for about 20, 30 minutes, and depending on the intensity and duration. And again, that's pretty normal. That's how your body's supposed to work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you think then, when you were talking about that great tip you mentioned with the whey, do you think there's a difference then between ingesting a whey shake versus having a piece of meat 20 to 30 minutes before? I'm just thinking more from a digestion point of view.
Well, again, if you were going to have a chicken meat or any other, like speaking of whole foods, then don't have it 20 minutes before. Have it like probably 2 hours before.
Okay, so that's a great tip. If you're going to stay with a whole food route, want it about 2 hours before a strength training session is going to be more ideal. But
never, what I like, as a rule of thumb or recommendation, what I tell my clients is just to stay, to not let more than 4 hours pass before having some food and training. So let's say that you're going to train. Okay, if you had, let's say, breakfast at 7 and you're going to train at 12, you don't want to shake. It's perfectly okay. Don't worry too much. It would be better if you had the whey shake, but again, don't worry too much. So either have breakfast, wait 2-3 hours, train, and then you can have a whole food meal after you train 1 hour later, or if you want your shake, or the other way around. Have especially for people who train very early in the morning, have a shake while you commute to the gym, train, then wait probably 1 hour, and then have a big normal meal.
And I was thinking, especially with the time in the morning, I know that some people they just don't like eating in the morning because it makes them feel a bit sick, or they're just not a bit ready yet. But I guess a shake is an easier way to get something into you versus trying to eat if you're that kind of person.
That's one of the main ideas behind this pre-workout concoction.
Okay.
We call it the Ketogains pre-workout coffee, and it's very much coffee. It can be decaffeinated if you don't like caffeine, but again, some people work out in the morning. Well, coffee does the trick. You can add 25 to 30 grams of whey protein powder, a little bit of MCT powder, and sodium and creatine, and it does the trick in a very great way. That's the formula we use.
What did you call it? The Ketogains?
The Ketogains pre-workout coffee.
Oh, that sounds delicious, actually.
It's very much in a way like the bulletproof coffee some people use, but this is everything that has here is based on evidence. So it's we do use MCT powder because it's basically a way to get you energized for the training session. Between 10 to 15 grams of MCT powder, and powder because it mixes better in the shake versus oil, and because it's milder on the stomach for some people. Some people, as you know, if you use MCT oil, it can be a little bit hard on the digestion for some persons, especially if they're not really used to using it. And then we do add sodium to it, about 2 grams. Again, because hydration is very important while on keto, and creatine, which is one of the only supplements we do suggest.
Okay. And when you say sodium, that can just be a natural salt that you added?
Himalayan salt, or even low salt, which is the one that is a little bit low on sodium but high on potassium. So you get a little bit of potassium as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And when it comes to fat sources, what are some typical fat sources that you would recommend?
I normally suggest people use fat that comes from foods. Plus, of course, avocado, coconut oil, MCT oil, uh, ghee. I'm more so of a dairy free follower in a way. I myself, it's not that I'm against, but I don't do too well with nuts and dairy in general. So what I do, and I recommend for clients who are on a weight loss protocol, is to avoid dairy and nuts, more so for the caloric density, because it's very easy to overeat on them.
Mm-hmm.
So because we want to optimize again a caloric intake, it's best to just get the fat from naturally occurring in your foods, plus again some avocado, olive oil as a dressing, the little fat that you may be using to cook, plus again MCT oil or ghee, etc. Right? Not go like some other people that add 5 scoops of butter to their coffee, that they need to add half a stick of butter on top of a sirloin steak. No, I don't think that's optimal.
Okay. And so how many meals in a day do you need to eat to maintain? I mean, anyone watching the YouTube video can already see through your shirt you're a big guy. And I'll share some pictures of you too to show, yeah, you're very muscular. So how much do you need to eat to sort of maintain that? How many meals in a day?
That's also like a myth. You really don't need many meals. More so you need the adequate amount of food. So even though I may look big, I really don't need that many calories. That's something that makes people really gasping in awe. But I'm normally I consume around 1,800 or so calories. So it's not that much. I have again a very efficient metabolism. So that would be my average, even when strength training. And
Wow.
I normally have like 2.5 meals. And by 2.5, what I mean is probably, depending on the day, a pre-workout shake, then a big meal after training, and then another big meal before I go to bed. That's normally how I eat. Or if for whatever reason I'm very hungry, like today, I had a breakfast. I had like some meat and one egg, and then probably I'm going to have a shake before I go to the gym after we finish the talk, and then I'm going to have a bigger meal after training.
Okay. And so when it comes to training, do you have any specific preference? Like, I'm just thinking of someone who's gone through a protocol where they've tried to lose excess weight to begin with, which is why they were ketogenic. And so they feel they're more at a healthy weight now and they want to start exercising and building muscle for general health. How do you introduce someone into strength training?
Well, let's go for the basics. People think that they have to start with cardio, and it's very funny, but cardio is one of the least efficient ways to actually lose body fat. Of course, if you're not doing anything, doing cardio is better than nothing. But the best formula we found with, again, thousands of clients is strength training. And we have a free program that you can get on Ketogains that is the 5x5 version of Ketogains, which uses a classic 5x5 method. So it's just basic compound lifts, squat, deadlift, bench press that you can do even at home. We have a barbell and a dumbbell version. And people at first may get a little bit afraid of because they think they cannot lift that heavy, but you start with your own body weight. Like even if you do an air squat, that's enough. Eventually, you will be getting stronger, and you can add some weight and so on. But that's a process. It's like you have to crawl before you run, right? You crawl, then you walk, then you go a little bit faster, then you can run. It's a process.
Okay. And how many times in a week would someone train? What have you found to be sort of optimal?
Again, it really depends on the availability and the schedule of the person. So I'm a believer that if you can train 5-6 days a week, go and train 5 and 6 days a week. But someone who is new to this and is just starting, probably 2 to 3 times a week. That's more than enough. But again, as you gain more strength, to gain more muscle and to gain more strength, it's a game of volume. And volume is defined as sets by reps by weight lifted. And there's only so much volume you can accumulate on a day-to-day basis. And so that's how you actually increase your muscle. You have to increase the volume you are training. And more advanced individuals will, of course, need more volume. And that only you can only do so by increasing the number of sessions that you do per week. But again, it's really between 5 to 6 times a week for highly advanced individuals, and 2 to 3 sessions per week for people who are just starting.
So are you a fan of the sort of Doug McGrath Body by Science 15-20 minute workouts?
If done, like, not really in a way, because I do believe the stimulus that he suggests is not optimal. That's good for people who are sarcopenic or older individuals. But if you're young and able, that's not the best. That's like, and there's a difference again between doing the minimal to maintain and what is optimal to grow. And the purpose of, or the protocol of Doug McGrath is very much as the minimal approach to get the minimal results.
Okay. And with weight training too, I've heard that some people in the ketogenic community say that they get less muscle soreness, so delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS. Is that something that is reported in the Ketogains community, that there's less of that effect?
That's highly individual, and the reality is that DOMS have really nothing to do with a good workout, no strength training. That's a myth. More so, the more adapted you are to a certain type of training, the less DOMS you're gonna get.
Okay. So that's,
and some people think that they actually need, like, if they didn't feel them, or very much like sweating, like if they didn't sweat, that they didn't do a good enough workout. It's an adaptation process. Like, people who are highly advanced in training seldomly get DOMS. I seldomly get DOMS anymore, and it's not because keto. It's because my body is highly resistant and is highly adapted to strength training. I can put someone who has never strength training on keto and have him do a different training session, and he will get, or she will get, DOMS. And we do get DOMS with a lot of our clients when we change the programs.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great tip again there that you just shared, that you don't have to feel that you've broken yourself to get the best effect there. It's not always the most ideal situation. You touched on with some of your clients being female, of course, too. And a question that always comes up with ladies is there anything more specific or different that they would need to do? So when it comes to strength training, is there any little nuances or little differences that might have to happen for women?
For the most part, there really isn't that much difference when talking about novice lifters. What they have to do is just go and strength train. Women tend to think that strength training is just for males, and actually women respond incredibly well, and even more so, better than males in some aspects, to strength training, especially to body recomposition, hormones, health, etc. All of our clients, I would say, do strength training. That we don't do cardio in our programs, and about 65-70% are women, and they come from a lot of them from having never strength training before, from doing the classic types of exercise that is just cardio and HIIT and Zumba and being on a bike, and never had the results that they're getting right now. And we're having them drop the Barbie weights, drop the group spinning sessions, and go and lift the weights like any man would do. You know, go to the place where where the heavy weights are, and let's start with the weight that you can carry with basic movements, and that's how you see results. The only difference that you see really with females is that they recover fairly faster than males in terms of how long they actually need to rest between sets and reps. And that's a physiological difference that men and women do have, and also about how they adapt to training. But in a way, outside of that, there's really not much to change in regards to training. And of course, some exercise variations if you want to sculpt the female body. But outside of that, like, for the most part, again, speaking of beginning and intermediate lifters, there's really not much to change.
And the same kind of gross body movements that you talked about earlier of benching and squatting.
The exact same movements that women tend to think that they will get bulky. And the thing is, no one gets bulky. And if you were to get bulky, that would be after 20 years of strength training. And also, well, women don't have the hormones that men do. So the rate at how they're going to be building muscle is going to be basically about half of their male counterparts. So it's nothing really to really worry about.
Okay, well, that's good for any ladies who are listening who are keen to get more muscle but don't want to, exactly. They don't want the big bulky muscle look. They just want that sort of lean muscle look.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And well, by doing strength training, what you do is, especially free weights, you prime your hormones to work for you instead of against you. And that's how you actually, get your curves, etc., is by doing strength training, not by doing lots of cardio.
So that always happens. You see in the forums of women who have some sort of hormonal issue that they're trying to balance out, be it a thyroid or something. It's so complicated. But as you said, if you found that doing strength training helps to sort of allow the body to regulate the hormones again.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Louise, we've talked a lot of cool, actionable stuff. The Ketogains community, is that only for people who want to be bodybuilders, or is it just for people, or is it even for people who want to start the process where they're overweight and they want to lose weight? Where does Ketogains come into this?
It's funny because the name may scare some people, but if you actually look at our demographics of people who are in the group and people who are our clients, it's very much what I said. It's about 65-70% women who are over 35. So it's not the typical group for bodybuilders. And we really don't cater to professional bodybuilders. We more so, our scope is for people who want to improve their lifestyle and their health. And the gains is not really speaking about muscle. It's speaking about gaining better body recomposition, gaining better health, gaining better cognition, getting more performance. It's gains applied to all aspects of your life via a ketogenic diet.
Cool. So this is the point where I ask you, are there any links that you could share or any resources for people to follow you? Because, you've shared so many actionable tips. I'm sure people want to, myself included, I know I need to get weight training again. And when I speak to people like you, it just reminds me, get off my lazy bum and actually go lift some weights and start stimulating my muscle again. So how can people follow you or keep in touch with you?
Sure. Well, the easiest way is just to go to ketogains.com. That's our main website. In there, you can look for we have some articles that we normally write on a monthly basis. But if you want direct input and interaction, you can go to Facebook and look for the Ketogains Facebook group, or to Reddit and the Ketogains Reddit group. Again, if you want, I normally answer all of the questions, and I'm very active on Facebook mostly. But if you tag me, I always get a notification, and I check and I answer any questions. And I do only ask one thing, though, is that people don't send me personal mails or personal messages. I respond and I give my advice freely and thoroughly, as long as it's done on an open format. Because my mission is to help as much people as possible. And that's the only thing I ask. You want direct advice from me, then ask openly so everybody can benefit and everybody can learn. If you want something direct from me, then we can do either personalized coaching or consulting, or we have just our next round of Ketogains bootcamps, which is a mini course in nutrition, strength training, self-improvement that we do on a month-to-month basis, and we start the next one next Monday. And it's a great way to start your education on not only on keto, but more so on basic nutrition and basic strength training. And it lasts 7 weeks.
Cool. Well, I'm going to link to all of those resources in the show notes for everyone listening. And I just want to say, Luis, thank you so much for sharing all that knowledge today. I learned a whole bunch more about how to grow good muscles. And I just want to say thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you, Gary, for having me.